So, have you heard of Henry VIII and how he had like 6 wives?
No.
Okay, well, back in England, Henry VIII, one of the Henrys and the many of the kings, had 6 wives. He was like running through his wives, and there's actually a whole musical now called Six, and I really like that musical. But Henry, being the king that he was, kept getting rid of his wives. Like lowkey kept his wives.
That's
for multiple reasons. One of them being that they weren't giving him male children. Very typical. Well, joke's on him, because now we actually know that it was Henry's fault, because he's the man, and he produces the sperm, and he's the one who would have had to give the Y chromosome to make the children male, and he didn't, and so they were all female. But there was a girl, a young lady. Actually, she wasn't that young. I don't know why I said that. But she found out that men were the ones who control sex determination. And this is the story of Nettie Stevens. Intro. Do.
Nettie Maria Stevens was born on July 7th, 1861, in Cavendish, Vermont, to Julia Adams and Ephraim Stevens. Her early life is a bit obscure, and sometimes different sources don't really line up, but we will do our best to piece everything together. So, her mother passed away early in her life, and by 1870, her father remarried. The family was moved to Westford, Massachusetts, where father worked as a handyman and a carpenter. Ephraim did rather well for himself and managed to own a few properties around the town, which gave him the ability to send Nettie to school.
So Nettie's consistently described as a star student with near perfect attendance and honor roll all throughout her early life education. I did not have perfect attendance when I was a child. I tried so hard, and my mom was always late. It would make me so mad because I really wanted perfect attendance.
Sweet, did being late make you not have perfect attendance?
Yeah. If you got too many tardies, you weren't considered, perfect attendance. So, anyways, side note. But she went to college preparatory school, which was basically high school, at Westfield Academy. And it's considered a quote-unquote co-ed school, which wasn't super common at the time. Co-ed's used lightly because I found out that there were only 3 girls in the entire class, and Nettie and her sister were 2 of them. So it seemed just more like Nettie and her sister, and that one other girl were the exception. But after her graduation at 19, she worked as a high school teacher / librarian to save up money for higher education. She moved to Lebanon, New Hampshire to teach high school zoology, physiology, math, English, and Latin. I don't know what they were teaching her at that school, but that's a lot of different subjects that don't have to deal with each other.
Yeah, she was teaching a lot. In 1896, Nettie traveled to California to attend Stanford University, where she obtained her bachelor's in physiology in 1899 and her master's degree in biology in 1900. During undergrad, she became interested in histology, which is the study of tissues, after working with her assistant, Professor Frank Mace McFarland, who happened to be an instructor at Hopkins Seaside Laboratory. She spent her summers completing cytological and histological research at Hopkins Lab. In 1901, she published her first paper, which histologically described ciliates, which are a type of protist, and eventually even identified 2 new species.
In the same year, she began pursuing a PhD in cytology from Bryn Mawr College, which was a women's college, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She quickly received the Bryn Mawr President's European Fellowship to do research and study abroad at the Naples Zoological Station with Theodore Boveri? He's German. And at the time, he was working on his contributions to the chromosomal theory of inheritance. Boveri's experimentation revealed that a complete set of chromosomes were necessary for normal development, and each chromosome, it said, maintained its identity. I'm assuming it just means it was replicated, it was completely copy-paste replicated. And while Nettie was experimenting and learning from him, she became interested in chromosomal biology.
After this, she returned to the U.S. and completed her doctorate with her thesis continuing her master's work. She detailed the life cycle and anatomy of many more new ciliates, defending her thesis in 1903 at the age of 42. After that, she stayed at Bryn Mawr as a research fellow. Do you want to talk about what a research fellow is?
Sure. So, research fellow is basically after you have gotten your PhD, it's like hard to just like go and like become a professor. So like typically you become a research fellow and then you like do postdoctoral studies and study for a little bit, and then you like either contribute to the lab that you defended your thesis in, or you'll go to a different lab and continue to work and find more research. So like basically you're a professional scientist. And then after you're a professional scientist for a little bit, then you can possibly become like a professor or anything like that. But like it's low-key like not really profitable. Like I recently got a job and my dad told me that his first job as a research fellow was making less money than what I got offered with a bachelor's degree. And that's really sad because he went through a undergrad, master's, and a PhD program, and then low-key was still making less than me with my teeny tiny little master's degree. But yeah, they're important. They make scientific contributions and make sure that undergrads and master's students don't mess the lab up.
That's wild. So again, research is not the most profitable career, and Nettie was quickly running out of funds. She was concerned that instead of being able to properly dedicate her time to research, she would have to just teach just to get by. Luckily, on the recommendation of her previous professors, she ended up receiving a grant from the Carnegie Institution of Washington to fund her research on heredity related to Mendel's law, which allowed her freedom from anxiety over the money question.
So research funding basically works on, like, funding only goes to things that people deem like important, or like what one specific person is like, oh, I have this disease and I have a ton of money, research it and find my cure or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so only things that people deem as important kind of get money. And so sometimes it's difficult for like people to receive money if they think something is impactful but the world doesn't really see it as impactful. I don't know if you want to add on to that or anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever done any research in like college or have friends that do that, they might sometimes talk about how their professors like don't have enough funds to buy certain things or to do certain projects. So that's like the main reason that the people who are doing research don't get paid a lot, because you get paid through your grants. So not only does it pay for you to do the experiment, it also pays your salary.
Yeah, and also once you run out of the grant, you're out of the job.
Yeah, then you're going to find a new grant.
Yeah. But Nettie was heavily inspired by her time in Europe and began questioning how exactly sex is determined in developing eggs, which was a very controversial topic at the time. There were hundreds of theories put forth by researchers and philosophers, and I'm going to go on a mini tangent real quick because there were some very interesting historical theories, and they made me giggle, and yeah, I'm sharing them with you because I think they're funny. Not all of them are funny. Sorry. Okay. Anyways, so the most common origin story of like males and females becoming males and females that most people know about is like, I think it's Genesis from the Bible. I am not well versed in Christianity, but God created Adam, and then he took a rib from Adam to create Eve, and I think that's the most common thing that most people know. Then there's another interpretation, which I've never heard of this one. I have heard of the previous one, but not this one. Basically, Adam was non-gendered. He wasn't male, or Adam was not a boy nor a girl. In fact, it was a hermaphrodite. Okay. So he was both. So he could just like procreate. I don't know if he could just like multiply himself. I found this from like a Elsevier. That's the like fancy research one. Mm-hmm. This was like an actual like full research paper on like how historically people were boys and girls. And so Adam just like duplicated himself and was a hermaphrodite. And then God was like, you know what? You seem kind of sad all by your lonesome. Let me just create a companion for you. And then that's what Eve became. And then I guess like after that, they like managed to like do the thing, and then like children became. So that's like the Christianity version. Okay. Then there's the Greek mythology version. I don't know if you've heard this one before, but people were originally quote unquote primeval people, and we were like little balls, like circles that just had 4 hands, 4 legs, and 4 legs, 4 hands, and 2 heads. Our heads were pointing in 2 different directions, and we were just a ball. Mm-hmm. And like, you know how like Zeus like overthrew his parents, and his parents overthrew their parents, and it was like the whole thing where like, I don't want you to overthrow me. So Zeus thought that the humans were going to overthrow the gods, and he was like, that can't happen. So he split the primeval people in half, So that's why we have our 2 arms and our 2 legs and only 1 face. And then the whole idea is that we search for our soulmate so that we become our whole primeval person again. Yippee, so sweet. So those were like the mythological story versions. Then we have the Greek philosophers who tried to figure out how sex was determined. So there was one where it was like the idea where the fetus was like either laying on the right side or like laying on the left side, and that would determine if it was a guy or a girl.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah. Then there was one where if it was the sperm coming from the right testicle or the left testicle, and that would determine if it was a man or a woman.
People were just guessing.
Well, so the whole point of them trying to figure out like what exactly caused male children versus female children was because they wanted male children and they didn't want girls. So they were like, if we can figure out what makes a male child, then we can have more male children, which is really unfortunate. And then another one, the last one that I thought was kind of funny, is that like there was the idea that like men were like hot and like women were cold, like men were like the fire element and women were the water element. And so if the man's heat was more overpowering and more dominant than the female's like coldness, then it would be a man. And then if it wasn't overpowering and the female dominated, then it was a girl. And the girl wasn't really like, the girl was just an underdeveloped man.
Yippee.
So slave for the philosophers for philosophizing, but they were so wrong. But also, like, I was thinking about it, I was like, if I lived in the Greek ages, how would I think about, like, conceptually, like, what makes girl, what makes boy?
Probably have some wild ideas.
Anyways, that's my tangent on how girls and boys were thought of in the previous. And also, when we were talking about males and females in this episode, we're talking about like biologic sex, XX versus XY chromosomes, which we will get into later.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get back to Nettie and the more scientifically backed theories. So one hypothesis was that sex was determined by external factors such as temperature, which is actually a common way that sex is determined in some reptiles, such as crocodiles, most turtles, many fish, and some lizards. So this theory is uncreatively named the temperature-dependent sex determination theory. Basically, the temperature of the embryo's environment impacts the hormones produced in the embryo, which leads to sex differentiation. It works differently in each animal. Turtles are known for commonly having more males at lower temperatures and more females at higher temperatures, while crocodiles are known for having more females at extreme temperatures and more males at moderate temperatures. I remember learning about that in like high school biology, and it like blew my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's like a ratio too. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, unless like the temperatures are very extreme, it's not just like all of the eggs in the clutch are just like girls.
They're just more likely to be girls.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, during the time that Nettie was researching sex determination, this theory wasn't proven. Evidence supporting temperature-dependent sex determination in vertebrates was actually first published by Madeleine Charnier at the University of Dakar in Senegal in 1966, many years after Nettie's passing. But like many other women, Madeleine's scientific contribution went unheard for several years.
So Nettie was actually the believer of the other major hypothesis for sex determination, which was a hereditary factor, aka you get it from your parents. Genetics was an emerging field at the time, so we talked about Mendelian genetics, which is kind of what we think of for like genetics. We think of it as like the simplest form of genetics. Basically, like if you've ever done a Punnett square in like high school, it's like you have like big A mates with little a, and then what's the percentage that has that trait or doesn't have that trait based on dominant recessive. Mendel actually supposedly, either he faked his results, or I don't know if you remember learning about this, but I remember him, like, us learning about the fact that, like, his results didn't actually line up, and he just kind of, like, fudged the numbers.
Little.
Yeah, like, kind of the way we make up yield in, like, Orgo Lab.
I think that especially came because he discovered, like, regular recessive and dominant stuff, but I don't think he was the one to fully figure out, like, or, like, he kind of did, but, like, codominance and all that other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, he, like, either fudged the results kind of, or just, like, theorized it, and then was like, yeah, my stuff totally makes sense. And then, like, low-key, like, it didn't make sense. But when Mendel was alive, he was a monk, by the way, which is funny. Not funny, I don't know.
It's interesting.
It's interesting. That's the right word for it. But when Mendel was alive, nobody believed him. They were like, man, this dude with his pea plants, like, he's crazy. Like, nobody knows what he's doing. He's just up there in the monastery with his pea plants. And then many years after he died, so this would be, like, turn of, like, the 20th century? When we're going from the 1800s to the 1900s, it became, like, more widely accepted that, like, Mendel was actually right. So because of this, we knew that chromosomes which are tightly wound, like your DNA, are like, because like DNA is super, super, super long, and like it's in all of your cells, and if it was unwound, it would like go around the earth like 2 or 3 times or something like that. I don't know. But we know that chromosomes are a thing. But when Mendel was thinking of chromosomes, he was thinking of what we call autosomes. So these are just the things that control everything except for like your sex. So just like your basic like hair color, eye color, height, things like that. Now, one of the first person to determine sex chromosome thingies was Hermann von Henking in 1891, and he was studying meiosis in firebugs. So meiosis, there's mitosis and then there's meiosis. I'm teaching you guys everything today. Mitosis is how your normal like body cells, like we have like our little like skin cells, that's how they divide, and it's just like literal copy paste of whatever the previous cell was. Meiosis is how you create your germ cells. Germ cells?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have your normal cell, and then it splits into, I'm trying to remember how to explain this properly.
So when you do like regular mitosis, you keep the same number of chromosomes, or you have the same number of chromosomes, but like you're considered a diploid. And the point of meiosis is to split it in half, because you know how like you need a sperm and an egg to combine together.
Right.
You don't want to have more. So diploid would be considered 2N, so you have the same amount of genetic material that all your other cells have.
Right.
So when a sperm and an egg come together, they need to be 2N. So meiosis will kind of like split a haploid into a.
So you have
into a haploid.
23 pairs of chromosome in normal cells, and so you have 23 pairs. But when you have meiosis, you just want to have 23 chromosomes.
Yeah.
Period.
So you'll have like unpaired, basically.
Yes, just 23 chromosomes, and then when the sperm and the egg come together, then you get your 23 pairs of chromosomes.
Yeah.
So Mr. probably Dr. von Henking, found that during meiosis in firebugs, half of the sperm inherited 11 chromosomes, and then half of the sperm inherited 12 chromosomes.
By firebugs, like, does he mean like fireflies, like lightning bugs?
No, like they look like little stink bugs. Like these things.
That thing does not light up.
No, it does not light up. Also, I heard that fireflies are going extinct.
I know. I saw something the other day and I was really sad.
Yeah. Oh no. How did I do this? Okay. But regardless, he called that 12th chromosome. So firebugs, some of them have 11 chromosomes, and some of the sperm had 12 chromosomes. So like, what's that extra like 12th chromosome doing there? Mr. von Henking called that the X element, which later becomes termed the accessory chromosome by other scientists after it was studied more. And this discovery of the X element prompted basically like the space race, like how we were like racing Vesha to like get into space.
But for the chromosomes.
And so all of the scientists were like really aggressively trying to figure out what was determining sex and what was the X element / accessory chromosome.
So they had funding.
They had funding. They did have funding. But Nettie was working on aphids. Mm-hmm. They look really cute. I feel like I'd freak out if I touched them, but they're these little like green like sap-sucking bugs. And she interpreted that the egg cytoplasm was an important factor of sex determination, which I think she ends up actually going back later and being like, this was wrong. But somehow she ends up changing gears, and then she starts working with mealworms, and that's what leads to her like major big discovery.
Nettie realized that male mealworms produce 2 types of sperm. The first had 10 large chromosomes, and the second type had 9 large chromosomes with 1 small chromosome. Does this sound familiar? Then she looked at the body cells. So a body cell and germ cell, we kind of just talked about this. Body cell has the pairs of the chromosomes, and the germ cell has half of a pair. Okay. And she found that the female body cells had always had 20 large chromosomes, and then the male body cells always had 19 chromosomes and one tiny chromosome. So 20 total, but one was tinier. So if we put these findings together, Nettie concluded that it was the sperm determining the sex because the female eggs only had large chromosomes, now known as X chromosomes, but the male sperm could include large or small chromosomes, now known as the Y chromosome. She published her first set finding in... I'll say that again. She published her first set of findings in 1905 called Studies on Spermatogenesis, which is now known as the XY model of inheritance. So yippee, she figured out what determined sex. Or did she?
So Edmund Beecher Wilson was another cell biologist from Columbia University working on the same sex determination problem, and he independently observed a similar phenomenon. So Wilson and Nettie were actually homies from before. She got that like prestigious like Carnegie institution funding. Wilson was actually one of the people to write her that recommendation for it. I think he also graduated from the same college as her. But Wilson published a paper just a few months before Nettie describing the XO model of inheritance in a different type of bug. So XO model of inheritance is basically, it's like dosage effect. Mm-hmm. So having XX would make you female. Having a lack of X would make you male. I'm trying to remember if this would relate to any of the things that the fun little theories we talked about. I don't think it does. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. So XY is what humans have. XO, some other organisms have. Jesus. But he used he used a similar process as Nettie, but it's made very clear in all of the research that they came to their conclusions separately. So, like, I think they were colleagues, but, like, they were working separately at different institutions. But he did talk about in his publication, because he published earlier than her, and was like, yes, like, Miss Stevens has been working on this problem, and I've observed similar findings as her. Like, it was like a unpublished like thing that she was working on, and so he was just like, yeah, she found this, and I'm agreeing with it, but my stuff's coming out first. So Wilson calls her Dr. Stevens in...
Oh, yippee.
That's a big yippee, because when I was researching her, she's listed everywhere as Miss Stevens, even though she has a doctorate. And it was really common at the time that even if women had doctorates, they wouldn't be called doctor. They'd always be called Miss so-and-so. And so that was really frustrating, but yippee for Wilson for, like, legitimately being like, Dr. Nettie Stevens has been working on this. And he actually, like, talks of her very highly and says, by whose kind permission I'm able to refer to her results. Like,
That's
he's
so
very
cute.
nice. He's very cutesy about it. But, yeah. The bug that Wilson used happened to have sex determination based on the second sex chromosome existing. So that's that XO. So the O stands for, like, there's no chromosome there at all. Nettie's sex determination was based on size of the chromosome. So you have your X, which is big, and then you have your Y, which is a smaller chromosome. And it just was lucky that they happened to choose, like, two different modes of, or, like, organisms that had two different modes of inheritance. Because, like, you could go and, I don't know what a roach's inheritance mode is, but, like, a roach and an ant, I feel like, would have the same mode of inheritance.
Potentially, yeah. I think it's really interesting, and, like, to make it very clear that, like, not every animal has the same sex determination, I don't know.
Yeah.
That humans do.
Right.
So, like, her XO thing, great. Or, I guess his. And then her size, probably still valid, just not valid in humans, necessarily. Like, we don't have, like, we don't have, like, the temperature sex determination. We also don't necessarily have, like, oh, if you have an X and a lack of a Y, then you're automatically necessarily...
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, like, we have a slightly different system.
Yes, like, we have XY, but other organisms have, like, temperature dependence, or XO.
Yeah, like, it's interesting that they, like, were able to figure out humans eventually, because they had so many deterrents, because everything is, like, so different.
Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't figure out temperature determination first. I feel like it would have been easier.
I agree, but maybe they just weren't looking at reptiles, because they also have to pick the right, like, model organism.
Right. I do imagine putting a crocodile in a lab would be difficult.
Turtles.
Yeah. But, yeah. Yippee.
The issue came with the fact that despite Nettie having more evidence-based and solid science to back her up, Wilson published first and was a more well-known and well-regarded scientist. So much of the credit of discovering sex chromosomes went to him. It doesn't seem like he intentionally tried to take the credit for this. It appeared that he was colleagues with Nettie and definitely acknowledged her work, but while researching Nettie, we found something called the Matilda effect. So, honestly surprised that we haven't heard of it until this specific case, but the Matilda effect is basically that women's contributions, particularly in science, are undervalued, denied, and overlooked in comparison to their male counterparts. This term pays homage to Matilda Joslyn Gage, who was a woman suffragist who was like, all the other women and very overlooked. But as the Matilda effect suggests, it was believed for a while that Nettie was just Wilson's assistant, which was absolutely not true. I feel like this also doesn't help that everyone's calling her Mrs. instead of Doctor.
Yeah. Also, she's a lot older than most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was a teacher for, until she was, 30. And then she went and got her, undergrad and master's and everything. So she's, 40. And the rest of them, I think, are,
younger.
Late 20s, maybe.
But they probably didn't have to, go through such a struggle to get the funding to go to.
Definitely not.
So, as it goes, Nettie is and was a strong, independent woman. Nettie soon returned to Bryn Mawr as a research associate in experimental morphology and remained affiliated with Carnegie Institution as a research assistant. I can't say Carnegie.
Carnegie?
Carnegie. Carnegie. She worked in those roles and continued to document evidence for chromosomal sex determination until she died of breast cancer in 1912 at the age of 50. It's really young.
Yeah. Also, we saw, the Matilda effect. We should have named the podcast The Matilda Effect. The Matilda Effect. That would have been so cool.
That would have been really cool. Guys, we're changing our name.
Wish I knew about it before we started. Because, I was looking up so many of these things.
Right.
And I never came across it. And then two separate of these sources both mentioned the Matilda Effect.
That's insane.
Yeah. So now enters another dude. He actually entered a while ago. I just didn't mention him. His name is Thomas Hunt Morgan. And similar to Wilson, Morgan recommended Nettie for the Carnegie Institution funding, and he actually was her doctoral advisor while she was a PhD candidate. He was just existing in the background and doing his own research, and it felt irrelevant to mention him until now. Also, right. I don't like him. But Wilson and Morgan were actually rather skeptical about fully adopting the theory that chromosomes were the basis of sex determination. Really skeptical, because they were too many people are telling us that it might be something else, and we don't want to go against, and they were super conservative, and they were we don't want to believe this until it's fully proven, which honestly is not a bad way to think about science, but it works against them in the end. But Nettie was confident in herself. She found her results, and she was yes, I know that this chromosome, the little Y chromosome, is what determines males, and the X chromosome is what determines females. And even though they were super skeptical, Wilson and Morgan were invited to a conference to discuss their theories on sex determination in 1906, while Nettie was still alive. Nettie and Wilson published at the same time in 1905. Nettie was ignored, and Wilson was asked to come explain his theory on sex determination. And I don't even think Morgan had a theory at this point. I think he was still on the, heat, thermo, temperature train.
Oh, gosh.
So, minorly tweaking.
So, even though Nettie was the one who truly found the XY pattern of sex determination, and we can give credit to Wilson for the XO pattern of sex determination, the XY is how it works in humans. So, that's the important one. Nettie's is important in the discussion of humans. So, which
is what the whole point of the research was originally intending to find.
Yeah, they weren't trying to find other things. They found other things, which is also awesome, but not the ultimate goal of the giant grant funding.
Right.
So, even though all of this happened, a lot of people attribute Thomas Hunt Morgan with discovering sex determination because of his work with the fruit flies. Oh my god!
Drosophila melanogaster.
Yeah, I think I was taught that he helped with humans.
I was also taught that.
Because his name is really familiar.
I was waiting for you to get there.
My biology My AP bio teacher in high school was obsessed with fruit flies to the point she made us take them home and do our own mini Thomas Hunt Morgan experiments on fruit flies.
Oh.
So, fruit fly mass murderer. So, Morgan basically knew that the work that was mostly Nettie and Wilson's, because fruit fries.
Fruit fries!
I'm gonna go cry in my car. So Morgan basically knew the work that mostly Nettie and Wilson did. We say this because fruit flies used the XY sex determination system. And then he used this information to do his little fruit fly sex-linked trait experiments. Which honestly, I don't really entirely remember.
It was basically that, like,
how to describe.
I think it was like body size, wing shape,
eye color.
Eye color was sex linked.
It is, yeah.
And it was something about the white eyes. I don't remember.
The red eyes.
Yeah, no.
Red eyes are girls, right?
I don't remember which is which, but like the important part was that one of them got the white eyes.
Yeah. There were characteristics in the fly that told you if it was male or female, and based on that, you could tell because the trait was attached to the chromosome, which gender it was.
Yes.
Yes. And then they would like mate them again and like do the experiments again to be like, if I mate him and her, what are they gonna have?
Right.
Anyway. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. So, Morgan received a Nobel Peace Prize in 1933.
I don't think it's a Nobel Peace Prize. I think it's just a Nobel Prize.
Peace Prize for fruit flies. He received a Nobel Prize in 1933 for his work. In my opinion, knowing that the X and Y are what determine sex is arguably more worthy of a Nobel Prize, but what do I know? We're just two girls.
Just two girls. So, despite Morgan knowing Nettie quite well, he was not nice to her. Like, not nice to her at all. He described her as a lab tech.
Take the Nobel Prize back.
Right, rather than a true scientist. She had a PhD, and he was calling her a lab tech. I would explode. I'd actually, if I did all of that hard work for someone to call me a lab tech. For those who do not know, the process of becoming, or like obtaining your doctorate is like so difficult.
It's hard. You have to go through so much schooling. Basically, the amount of schooling it takes to become a whole real doctor, like a medical doctor, is basically the same in time. Maybe slightly less, but it's a really long time. It's whatever to get you up to college, then 4 years of undergrad. Then if you choose to do a master's, that's at least 2. If you go straight to a PhD program, that's between 4 to 6, sometimes longer if it takes you longer to defend your thesis. It's a really, really long time.
Also, like when you do your PhD, you basically have to find something new. Like the whole point of your like doctoral dissertation is that you found something new and you're adding to the body of knowledge. You can't just be like, oh, I'm expanding on it. Like you have to find something new. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard, especially nowadays, because like everything's already been found. Not everything, but it's
a lot of things have been found.
A lot of things have been
harder.
It's harder to find new things.
You have to find new teeny little things.
And when you're when you have your PhD, you are like considered an expert in your field, and you have to know every single little thing about it. Like you should be able to explain it from like the micro, nano, atomic, cellular level all the way up to like space level. So, anyways, all that's to say is that he really should not have been calling her a lab tech, and it makes me really mad.
You can become a lab tech right out of high school. No experience, no nothing. If you can find the person to hire you, you can be a lab tech, a lab assistant, for basically no experience.
On-the-job training.
We love on-the-job training, but still, a lab tech?
Anyways, so in her obituary, Morgan said like 2 nice things about Nettie, and then talked about how she was overly cautious and at times wanting in that sort of inspiration that utilizes the plain fact of discovery for wider vision. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound nice. And the way that I read it, like...
It's like condescending. It's
condescending. And like, I don't really understand what he's trying to say, but the source told me, and it was a reliable source, that it wasn't nice. He often described Nettie's experiments as too observational. And like, to a degree, like, Nettie also agreed with him and was like, yes, like, I am thinking that these are the chromosomes.
You can professionally criticize without, like...
being a butthole.
Exactly.
And she was like, I need to do breeding experiments to prove my theory. but then she died. So
Oh, so then he did them for her.
yeah, so he low-key kind of stole what she was thinking about.
It's literally giving Rosalind Franklin. It's like, here's the idea, here's the beginning, and then you grab it and you run with it.
Yeah.
And then you forget to write her name in the credits.
Right. So, yeah, so, like, even, like, varying sources, some sources will be, like, Morgan low-key just, like, stole her entire thing, and then some of them are, like, Nettie came to it, and then, like, Morgan came to it, like, separately, quote unquote.
I mean, he was friends with Wilson,
right? So I think he knew about everything she did, and then maybe she was like at a party or whatever conference one day. She's like, "Yeah, I should probably do breeding experiments," and then she passed away. And then he's like, "Oh, I'll do the breeding experiments."
Yeah, he was just biding his time. He was figuring out when to jump in. I think even if she didn't pass away, he still would have probably found a way to weasel his way into this project.
A weasel.
During her lifetime, Nettie did make it to American Men of Science. This is a show.
No, I think it was like a or I don't know about a magazine. Like, you know how it's like Forbes like top 30?
Yeah.
But like, I guess women weren't American, so like, American men only. So women can't be scientists.
Nettie made it on the list of American Men of Science, which only listed 18 women out of 1,000 recipients. Okay.
Yes.
So she got some credit, but not nearly as much as she deserved. Without Nettie's discoveries, the field of genetics would be wildly different today. So imagine if we were still trying to figure out how sex determined was based on the position that the fetus was in, and then women would have to like keep shifting to make sure the fetus was in the right position to make sure that they would either get a boy or a girl, and then they'd be like, oh no, I got a boy, I guess I did it wrong.
I'm weird. I really want a girl. I'm an only child, and I really want a girl so that like, it can be like my mini me.
No, see, I don't want kids, but if I were to have one, hypothetically, it would have to be a girl.
Yes.
So I would just adopt
all of my
one.
friends think we're really weird for wanting specifically girls, and she doesn't want a child, but me, all my friends think I'm weird for wanting a girl.
But like, I can see it because it's fun. You get to play dress up with them. You get to like, you know, go on a little coffee run. Like, it's so cute. Anyway, her story is similar to so many other women in science. She made a huge discovery that was undervalued and overshined by the men of her era. Despite all odds, she worked diligently and deserves to be recognized for her findings. Hopefully, by sharing these stories, we can do a little more to bring justice to Nettie and all the female scientists who earned it.
Yippee! The end.
Thank you for tuning in.
Chromosome.
Oh, did you know the Y chromosome is like shrinking?
Is it really?
Yeah. If you look at like over time and when they started studying it and like taking like karyotype pictures of it, it gets smaller. It's been getting smaller.
Interesting.
It's just fading away into nothingness.
I knew that they were like losing like testosterone, but I didn't know they were like losing their genes.
I don't know if them losing testosterone is like correlated to the...
It probably is.
You think so? I was just thinking that it was with like how like our quality of food and everything has changed over time.
Well, that's
like,
what's impacting
climate change.
Testosterone also.
Do you think that is impacting the size of it?
Of the chromosome? I don't know, but I also do know that like girls are also getting their periods a lot earlier too, like crazy earlier. Like they're like 7-year-olds,
which is insane.
And I think do you remember at Orgo when I asked Dr. Smith, and he was like talking about how like BPA has like some effect on like estrogen or something like that.
Yeah, because...
And then I was like, do you think this is why women are like getting their periods earlier? He said, no, that's a stupid question. Why would you ask that?
You see, I think it depends on like the day you would ask him, because some days he'd be like kind of going through it, and then other days he'd like give you like, if you asked him that question on the right day, he would have talked for like 2 hours straight and held the whole class.
Moral of the story: bye bye Y chromosome.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts and opinions.